Hi everyone, thanks for coming. Welcome to our Tales from the Trenches with our wonderful panelists here. I'd like to introduce Juliana Phelps. She is our moderator for our panel today. And she graduated DU both for undergrad and master's, so thanks for her to that. And I'll let Juliana take over from here, and she'll introduce herself and then our panelists, and then we'll go from there.
Great, thanks Karen. Hi everyone, we're so excited that you guys could join us today. Just a few ground rules before we get started. We do have the chat open for you guys to ask questions, and we'll start with just some basic questions to our panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions from you guys towards the end. So if you do have questions, feel free to put them into the chat. And otherwise, we're looking forward to having you guys here for a very apropos conversation today. So I wanted to start off by introducing the panelists. We have Tyler Beins, Meg Hellmuth, and Nick Phelps. And I'd like to start off if you guys can just kind of introduce yourselves, give a little bit of background about what year you graduated, what industry you're in. So let's start with Tyler.
Hey everybody, so I'm Tyler Beins. I graduated undergrad in 2008 and then finished my master's in 2009. Currently I'm with Janus Henderson Investors. So my current job is I head up the vendor management office and market data. So it's a lot of vendor oversight in terms of risk and performance for some of our key partners, as well as active management on many of our data providers, such as like Bloomberg, Thomson Reuters, and MSCI and FactSet.
And Meg?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Meg Hellmuth, and I live in the Chicagoland suburbs. I graduated DU in 2008, and I am in the hospitality world. So I graduated with a hospitality focus, and I am the Associate Director of Sales at our Park Hyatt in St. Kitts. So Park Hyatt's Hyatt's luxury brand, and then St. Kitts is a small island in the West Indies. So same chain of islands as St. Martin, St. Bart. So don't live there, unfortunately, right now, but get to visit often when times are good. So that's all about me.
Great. And Nick?
Very cool. Thank you. I'm Nick Phelps, graduated in 2009, just like Meg, also a hospitality grad. When I graduated, I ended up working for Fairmont Hotels and Resorts. Got the entrepreneurial itch and started my own company with a fellow DU grad, actually a couple other DU grads. Ran that business in the Washington, D.C. area. I was a direct-to-consumer food delivery business for, I don't know, about 8.5 years or so. And then sold it last February and have recently joined in the past 8 months or so, Cultivate Advisors, where I now work with businesses from solo entrepreneurs through 20, 30, $50 million a year in sales, directly with one-on-one sessions with CEOs and owners to help them navigate growing and scaling a business, but also these challenging times. So a lot of the things that we talk about with the owners too.
Great. Well, thank you guys all for joining us. As we know, this panel is really about navigating during a downturn as you're graduating. And I think when you guys were in school, you were seeing that with the financial crisis. And so with what's going on now, I think a lot of our students are kind of experiencing similar things. So we wanted to get your insight, what kinds of things you did, what kinds of, I guess, advice for the current students. So wanted to start out, the first question was, how long did it take you each to get a job after you graduated? And was there anything in particular that you found was kind of the most useful as you were looking for that first job? So let's kind of change it up a little bit and start with Meg on this one.
Sure, yeah. Again, I graduated in 2008, so it was a little bit before the crash. So I kind of feel like may have been what a lot of people experienced only a few months ago. So I graduated, and I know they still do it, the job fair that the hospitality school puts on. So I actually had 11 job offers, so great economy at that point. And again, I'm sure some of you have dealt with that as well. And then moved to Chicago with Four Seasons. So Four Seasons Manager in Training Program is the one I selected. They said, where do you want to go? And I said, Hawaii or California, and they moved me here. But same weather. No, so I was here for 7 months, or in the role for 7 months. I started June, drove a U-Haul from Denver to Chicago, started right away. And then 2 weeks before Christmas, so 7 months into the job, they canceled the whole program. I had all the feelings that I'm sure a lot of you guys are having now, especially those that had programs, whether they're postponed or canceled. Anger, frustration, I'm amazing, why would you do this to me? And ended up, they gave us 6 weeks to find a new job. So I kind of applied for anything out there, from outside of hospitality to inside of hospitality. Obviously wasn't a great time, just like now in the hospitality sector. So I ended up getting 2 job offers. One being a manager for a yacht company selling memberships, some of our customer service compared to hospitality. And then just through mentorships within 4 Seasons, I had kind of developed, somebody knew somebody who was hiring an admin role within a new hotel that was opening, which was the Elysian Hotel, which is now the Waldorf in Chicago. And they needed an admin role. So I kind of had to look at it all and say, do I want to be a manager and kind of leave hospitality? Or do I want to stay in an industry that I really do love, and happy that I did, and chose the Elysian route? I talked to a lot of people. I talked to Dr. Corson, which many of you know, Patty Farmer, who are still mentors of mine. Talked to them both at length about that decision then, like I do with most of my decisions now, and ended up staying in with the promise that I would eventually become a manager there, which did end up happening pre-opening. So I opened that hotel. So it was just a lot of kind of looking to see, did I want to pivot or did I want to stay in an industry and maybe take that step down? Again, it ended up being the right decision. I still firmly believe. Is that the right answer? Or unanswered?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that was great. I think that's really insightful.
Long-winded.
Yeah. So I'm curious if Tyler or Nick, if you kind of have the same experience where it didn't quite hit you until after you graduated, or if you were really seeing the struggle while you were in school. So kind of same question, how long did it take you guys? We'll start with Nick. How long did it take you to
Sure.
get a job?
You know, similar to Meg, I was actually really lucky. I had a job and a contract lined up earlier because I was very active in the job fairs. You know, it was one thing with, I graduated in 2009. So we had started to see the signs of bad things happening in 2008 in hospitality in particular. Like it tends to lag a little bit unless it's a global pandemic, which puts the stop on everything, but usually it tends to lag because people have already committed money and traveling, and there's big conventions and things of that nature, and so it usually lags in that direction. I was lucky to have been contracted about 6 months or so before graduation. That being said, I had a couple moments leading up to graduation where it seemed like things were hitting the fan a little bit more, and I remember having to have a couple very interesting talks with Fairmont. That was a very delicate dance of showing ambition and wanting to keep it going when they were also trying to change a little bit of their process, potentially even cutting some of their programs because of the economic uncertainties. There was a period of time where I was actually looking at potentially having to move between different hotels that I was planning on, which was kind of crazy, knowing, hey, I'm going to move back to Washington, D.C. to go work at this one property. And there was a potential for that property to no longer be taking a program. And so they were looking at moving me elsewhere, which just kind of threw a lot of just a little bit of craziness towards the end of my senior year. I think the biggest thing for me that I really noticed, that even though I was one of the lucky ones who had a job and I was able to go and take on that job, I remember being in charge of at the Fairmont in that city of taking charge of the internship program for the next set of class that was coming in 2010, and it was dramatically different. And just not only the criteria, but just the level of what we were able to do was so dramatically downsized from the past. And so really, luckily I was actually able to hire another one of our alum from DU to come to DC and really fight for that and put, for those pushes. But it was a very different time, and it required a lot more of, how to stand out from the crowd more than anything else, because obviously in a limited job market and in a changing job market where businesses are downsizing in a lot of ways, or at least restricting capital, that you had to figure out ways to stand out from the rest. And so really working with people to do that at that time. So I was blessed to be able to make it through it, but I certainly felt it for some of my colleagues.
And before we get to Tyler, I just had a question about that with the interns in the next year. Were you able to look at some of those interns' resumes? Was that part of your job? And if so, what were the things that you were particularly looking for that really kind of made them stand out?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So definitely looked at resumes. I mean, one of the beauties and curses of being at a 5-star, chain is that everybody looks great, right? Like there's a lot of talent out there, and that's part of the problem. This is probably the first time that I really got into the hiring process where I was spending time on phone interviews with people. And I realized it's not so much what's on paper. It's a lot more, it's attitude driven. A lot of it's, their personal drive and ambition and understanding what their passion for the industry was. A lot of the things that we do, and candidly, I think this is true for just about anybody who's going into the job market, a lot of what you do can be taught, right? Like it's teaching like hard skills when you get there. The thing that you can't teach is the heart and the passion and the drive and really just that work ethic behind it. And those were the things that were really coming through to me when I was asking, other students about, well, tell me projects that you've been involved in at your university, or what were your big passions, whether it was, if you were in Greek life or if you were in other, programming board type stuff. I was like, what are your big passions and how did you demonstrate that passion? And like, what did that look like for you? And when I started to get that, I could start to identify people who I'm like, okay, this is a really good person on paper, but didn't actually seem to have a whole lot of passion or heart behind it. Just seemed like a logical choice. And other people who you could just tell, like wake up in the morning wanting to go and do this. They're like, I don't necessarily know how I'm going to do it every day, but I have the will to figure it out. And that's really what I was going for.
Great, thanks. Tyler, do you want to share your story about how long it took you to get a job after you graduated?
Yeah, so my experience was actually very different from theirs. So my undergrad was in finance and real estate, and 2008 was when the real estate market in particular was crashing throughout the US. So the options for anything in real estate investment were slim to none. Luckily, I had grad school to go to in 2009, so I got my international MBA during that time. I finished that summer, and it probably took me about 4 months before I got a job. And really kind of my strategy there was almost apply for anything at that point, trying to get my feelers out there. My class from grad school was kind of going through a similar thing. I think all of us were in the same boat with only a few people being able to lock down jobs fairly quickly. Ended up just kind of doing some construction jobs for the first few months, and then got my first job in November. At the end, I think it was like right before Thanksgiving, which was with a company that was a subcontractor for the Department of Energy, and they had actually started to recruit a lot of Daniels grads. And really, kind of what happened was it was sort of just us using our network at that time. I think the first person was in my cohort, and she kind of told one of our other coworkers and friends, so he got the job, and then suddenly he threw it out to me. And then I think at the end of the day, they hired probably about 10 of us. So it was kind of one of those things to where, we really utilized our network at the time with the school. What I ended up doing to start was definitely not, I guess, my intended career path by any means. But kind of where I sit today, it actually worked out. Some of the skills that I learned there, I was able to transfer and move over to Janus in 2012. And then from there, I've taken on different jobs, and really kind of what I'm doing now, like the aspects of my day-to-day and kind of managing a team, both in the US and globally, are exactly what I kind of, if you would have asked me back in college, like what would be the ideal situation for you to sit in, it's pretty close, which is kind of cool. But, you can never really look through that crystal ball and say, is this a good choice? And particularly when you're faced with that downturn sort of environment, do you take the first job that's offered to you, or do you try and hold out? And honestly, what I would say is if you get a job offer and if you're looking at kind of what makes up that job, if there are certain tasks or certain skills that you'll be learning in it, definitely take it, because the opportunities are minimal. Particularly right now, I know my company's on a hiring freeze. We have probably, I think, 3 positions globally open, and none are very like junior. It's definitely one of those things to where if you can get your foot in the door somewhere, do it, learn as much as you can, and then just really make sure that you're focusing on those skills that can kind of move you to that next position.
Great. And that's actually a perfect segue to some of the other questions that I had, but I wanted to start off because it's interesting that you brought up grad school, and that was one of the discussion points. that I had in mind was what would you say to someone that's thinking about going to grad school after graduation, especially right now? And knowing that that's what you did, Tyler, do you kind of looking back and saying, okay, well, was that the right move for you? Why or why not? Or, would that be the right move for students right now? And then I'd also love to hear from Meg and Nick after Tyler's done on that same question.
Yeah, I think for me it was completely the right move. The one criticism I still hear is really because that was when the 4.1 program was still active, and some employers have come out and said, we would like to have some more experience under the belt of folks that graduate with an MBA, which I understand. But at the same time, I mean, if you're going straight through and there's an economic downturn to where there's really nothing out there, anything that you can do to pad up your resume, I would suggest doing it. I still learned a lot from my coworkers. I think, someone that's coming out of undergrad with minimal experience, they're more focused on kind of, I guess, what are the presentation skills you're learning in school? Like some more of those kind of more technical things that maybe someone who's been out of the academic world for a few years has kind of forgotten. So there's definitely some give and take. I guess grad school is not cheap by any means. So it's a hard thing to kind of, do you take on more debt for something like that, particularly if it's not a guarantee? I just have to say from my experience though, particularly with my first job and really keeping in touch with a lot of my classmates.
Oh no, it looks like we lost Tyler. I think while we're waiting for Tyler to come back, Meg, do you want to go ahead and answer that question?
Yeah, sure. I don't have a graduate degree. I have always kind of said, because it is a question that comes up, would you ever go back? And it's not that I don't like school. I feel in the hospitality world, kind of as Tyler was saying, experience is really important. And I think that's what's so great. Oh, hi, Tyler. That's what's so great about the, internship programs and the work hours that are required. But I've always said if I ever got turned down for a job because I didn't have a master's, then I'd go back to school. And still to this day, I haven't. I think, again, in hospitality as a segment, it's a lot of it's networking, it's who you know, and you kind of learn as you go, and there's continuous learning opportunities presented to you throughout. So that's why, for me, graduate school still, to this day, isn't something that I've really put more thought behind, because I do so much continuous learning in the hospitality world.
Great. And Tyler, did you want to finish up what you were saying, or do you feel like you completed?
Yeah, I think I was just kind of finishing up to where, from my experience, it worked out well. Yeah, it kind of allowed me to really have an additional network outside of my undergraduate classmates.
Great. Nick, did you have anything to add on to that?
No, I think that Tyler really, I didn't get my MBA either. I've thought about it multiple times. I am a big believer in getting experience. I think my former business partner, very similar, was part of the 4.1 program, went right through, made a lot of sense that way. It is a big financial commitment, so that's an individual thing for everyone to pursue. I do think, and this has changed a lot over the last decade or so, but there's a lot of additional programs that you can now take that are more certificate driven and or much more specific driven. And in a time of uncertainty like we are right now, if you're just about to go start a 2-year program, you might need to weigh a little bit of like, hey, what's really needed in the market right now to be more attractive from a job perspective? And potentially there are certificates in certain areas that might be less expensive for you personally from a debt perspective. And then the second is that it actually might be more applicable to today, to getting a job, in which case then you start to get some experience, potentially can then back that into a general MBA or a specific MBA in the long term. I know that at some point here in the next probably 5 years or so, I'd love to go back and get my executive MBA. I feel like I'd be able to add a lot more to a program like that, because I would have, a decade, almost 2 of experience underneath my belt, where it would actually not just be class. Instead, I'd be like, oh yeah, I should have known that back then. So I think that there's a big, a lot that comes from that, but obviously you got to do what you have to do right now.
Yeah. Great, thanks for your feedback. Yeah, I agree. I think it really depends on your situation and what you're looking for. Because I took about 15 years off before I went back to graduate school, and for me, it was more of doing a career shift. So I think everyone has their own choices, but it's definitely important during this time to think about and consider. So thanks for your guys' feedback on that. Another theme that I think I'd love to discuss that came up, I think Meg and I think it was you, Nick, that said that you both kind of got your jobs or your job offers right out of undergrad from job fairs, but then all three of you have mentioned the networking piece, which I know networking is essential in getting the jobs and moving to other jobs, whether you're straight out of undergrad, out of grad school, or have been in the industry for a while. So I'd love to just talk about that a little bit on what role networking kind of played in your career path, especially during the financial crisis, and then kind of if you have seen anything now that everything is going virtual and whatnot, and kind of what your thoughts are around networking virtually, and maybe any advice that you might want to give the students now. So let's start with Nick.
Oh boy, the fun networking question. So I'm a big believer in networking, whether it's passive or active. I think the DU community, one, because of how small it is actually a great platform that you begin that network, right? Hospitality school, some of my best friends today are still from that. All my, ironically, probably 60 out of the 100 people at my wedding that were all sub 50 were all DU alum and board members and things of that nature. So like very DU focused. And so I think that there's a network effect that's really incredible from the university standpoint. When I think about it in the broader picture, one thing that I always think about with networking is like, it's not just about what you want, it's also understanding what the other side is looking for in the relationship. And so I'm a very big person in believing that you need to provide value. And that's how you get value in return from things. If you're just going there looking for just, oh, hey, can I meet you because I hope that you can hire me? It's like, well, maybe. Like, tell me what value you can provide, right? Like, tell me your strengths. Tell me what else you're looking for. Tell me why you'd want to be a part of something, right? And just networking in general, I think, is all about value being created on both sides of the equation. If it's just a pure transactional approach to networking, it never seems to work very well, whether that's when I was in college and meeting people, or if it was after in my first part of my career to launching my own business, or even today where I do a lot of networking. It's all about trying to figure out what's the value that can be created on both sides of the equation, and knowing that it does, takes two, right, to network. So I think that's a really important part.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with that. I always tell people it's not who you know, it's who knows you, because you can go out and meet hundreds of people, and if they don't remember you the next day, then it doesn't do you any good. So yeah, absolutely providing value to that network. Tyler, let's go ahead and get your take on networking, and then I'd also love to hear about a little bit if you have ideas on the virtual networking piece as well.
Yeah, I think Nick hit on a bunch of it. I think one of the things, and particularly when I was younger too, this was the hardest part, is really kind of being patient as you network, because you want to get out there and your goal is to get a job, and not everybody's going to have a job that they're going to shell out to in the first instance, or even pretty soon after that. But I think just having people know that who you are, what you're about, your interests, and I think if you pop up and you come to mind, I think that's probably when it really stands out, because through any of us in our careers, and as the years goes on, there's going to be opportunities that come up. It's like, oh, do you know anybody for this position? If those skill sets kind of match up with someone that what I have in mind or something, I'll definitely make sure that I flow that information to that person. And I think it's really just kind of making sure that you approach networking in a way that looks genuine. If you're going to go and talk to somebody that you're interested in their company or their career, really make sure that that's where the conversation is focused on. Because then I think by you kind of showing interest and asking those questions, they'll remember you. And I think then it's kind of top of mind, instead of someone coming and asking, hey, I really want to get a job. Like, do you have anything? Keep me updated. Just kind of loses its luster a little bit. And then in terms of, I guess, maybe recommendations, I'd say maybe just reach out to those people that are in your direct network, or you've got someone that can maybe help. I mean, I know the career services has taken leaps and bounds over the years in terms of what they can do and who they can connect you with. So, and any DU alum I know would be happy to talk to somebody. If you reach out via LinkedIn, just kind of make sure that messaging is more of, I just would like to learn more about, what you do. It's been something that has just based off of the company, looks of interest, handling it from that approach.
Great. And Meg, what are your thoughts? You want to add anything else onto what these guys said?
Yeah, no, I totally agree when it comes to the being genuine and providing value. And I like to add to like no motive. I think when I get reached out to, or if anyone reaches out, it's when they're like, I want to talk about this job. It's like, it automatically puts up that barrier versus coming in and just saying, hey, I want to hear your story. I just want to talk, build that network, during this time. I think, and I'll hit the virtual aspect because I'm in a very different position too. I'm actually furloughed right now. So in the hospitality world, it's what it is. Hotels are closed from St. Kitts to Chicago. So for me, networking and especially virtually is what I do for multiple hours a day when I'm not keeping a 4-year-old alive. So for me, I am doing happy hours via Zoom with clients of mine. So I oversee the travel industry segment, which is working with luxury travel advisors. And my specific segment is so relationship focused. And that's what I love the most about what I do. So I call them walk and talks. So I'll walk the dog and I'll talk to a client who normally is just too busy to talk to. And I have their ear now. And I am not, again, going in with a motive. I'm not calling them, say, hey, remember my hotel? First of all, legally I can't. I'm not being paid by them. But for me, it's staying relevant and it's staying top of mind. And it's building that human connection right now. So it is, whether it's walk and talks, and sometimes there's cocktails and, Yetis on those walks. And I'm, on a lot of trainings and stuff with clients. And so I can see them and we're, texting or Instagram messaging through the whole, trainings and things like that, just because it's a very network driven role I'm in. So it's just remaining relevant is kind of what I've been doing a lot of.
Great. I don't know if you have an answer, but I'm just curious. I know there's been a lot of kind of comic things about what happens when you are having virtual calls. And I'm just curious, since you've been doing a lot of that, have there been any major faux pas that you've seen that maybe wouldn't happen if it wasn't virtual?
I mean, I've seen them online and I love them.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. A lot of mine are like, again, I was joking in the pre-call about like the BBC report of a little kid running in. I was actually on a training the other day, or a webinar through Girl Scouts of America. Again, random network, but they posted a bunch of stuff. So I said, let's listen to this, and about how women work from home and kind of looking at with families at home, maybe without, our jobs don't always, just a whole slew of things. And they said, and one of the panelists, kid walked in to tell her that she finished her homework. And she's like, I'm not even gonna apologize for that because that shouldn't have to be an apology. So those are kind of the things I've had more of, but it's actually been wonderful. Yeah, I haven't had someone going to the restroom or someone standing up without pants on. So yeah, I've been good there, thankfully. Cool. A lot of drinking though, so you never know.
Yeah, I think it's just important to know that, when you're face to face, I think you're aware of how you're coming off to people, but sometimes when you're on video, you tend to forget a little bit. So it's something to just keep in mind if this is going to stay kind of the new normal, which it very well might. But going back to all of your experience, another theme that I've heard from you guys a lot is keeping yourself relevant and keeping your skills up, which is what a lot of people are doing right now. People that are furloughed or looking for work are looking for ways to keep their skills up. So I was curious if I think you guys were able to find your positions fairly quickly out of school, but during that time, I think, Meg, you said it took you 6 weeks between jobs at one point. Were there any skills that you guys practiced or looked at or really perfected during that time after after undergrad during the crisis and whatnot that you think that you look back on and say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that I did that. That's been so beneficial to me. So, and I'll go ahead and start with Meg on that one.
Oh gosh, I gotta hear my voice more. I try to remember back then. Yeah, so my biggest thing, and it's still happening right now, is just staying up on information. I think a lot of my, going back, Nick mentioned during the interview process, and I interview a lot of people. I very rarely, because I get your bullet points of what you've done on a job. My job is personality. Let's be honest here, it's hospitality. So it's all about, those things you can't teach somebody. So my favorite section on a resume is actually like personal interests, and, whether it's skiing to calligraphy to, rugby is still in my husband's, because yes, he played for DU, but that's, many years later. But at least it sparks those conversations. So, but one of my other questions is, have you read anything good lately? And I'm not looking for you to name, the most, industry publication. Obviously, I think those are important to stay on top of, and that's kind of the trainings and the readings I've been doing during this time. But it's even, a beach read. It's, something fun, and it builds that personality and that human connection again that I think is so important. So during this time and I remember doing that as well, and that's just something I think is important. What news article or what news publications are you subscribed to? Industry related, but also worldly as well.
Great. Nick, did you want to weigh in on how you used your extra time to stay relevant? And
so definitely piggybacking off of Meg on the making sure you're staying informed. My biggest thing is always what skills do I wish I could get better at? So regardless of it being 8 years ago or 10 years ago, or if it's today, there are little things that I definitely didn't take advantage of, like learning more data analytics and learning how to better manipulate, Excel documents and, basically do some what feels like relatively basic things. But I didn't spend enough time in college doing that because I was in hospitality and I was more carried about experience than anything else. Now looking to what I even spend my time on, on weekends, occasionally I'll take a Udemy course, or I'm taking a Skillshare thing on something new that I haven't done before. Something just trying to always keep the sharpening the knife a little bit, right? And trying to find areas that I feel like are most relevant. Today, I advise most of my clients on how to do things and where they should be focusing their time. So it's a little bit different, but I too like to, it's kind of like the forever student approach, right? Don't stop learning. And it doesn't matter what that necessarily is, just keep learning something.
Great. And Tyler?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing that I did when I was first looking for a job, just with that interim, was really trying to understand the industries that I wanted to be a part of. And I think that's probably, and a lot of it's kind of prep work for, your hopeful interview and everything. I think coming in there with not only just good questions on kind of what goes on with the industry, but even just kind of in my world now. My jobs that I have, you really, there's nothing in school that's 100% fit, for me to hire straight out. So it's really, looking for those soft skills. I think Meg mentioned it too. It's just in terms of if you're a good fit for the team that I'm looking to hire in the company as a whole, and you really have a genuine interest in that company and you're showing it, I think that's the biggest thing that you can do, particularly if there's not much else out there, and there's no, the money's a little tight. You may not have money to take on an extra course or something, but yeah, in terms of what Nick mentioned too, if there is something that you're, a coding skill that you'd like to have, or something that's very specific, now's the time to do it if it's possible.
Great. So my next question is kind of along the same lines, but a little bit differently. Where's my question? There it is. Sorry. So what did you do in 2009 that you would have done differently, looking back? Or is there something that you did do that absolutely paid off? So I think if any of you have the answer right away, I'll let one of you jump in. I know that's a tough question.
Yeah, I'll just jump in quickly. I think, one thing, I was never the A+ student the entire time, right? Like I did a good job of making sure that I got a mix of B's and A's so that but also made sure I had enough time to have fun in college and enjoy it and really also have the network effect, right? I mean, you don't just go to school to learn, you're going there for a whole lot more than that. And so, for me, I think what I ended up doing right, especially in that last year to secure the job and then keep it and things of that nature, was you have to sell yourself, right? You have to ask for it, right? It's not just like it's assumed that just because you did well that all of a sudden people are going to go for that, or that you're going to stand out from the rest. There's a lot of great people out there who have very competitive resumes, who have all those things, but a lot of them aren't willing to ask and put themselves out there. Sell yourself, connect with other people. That's that networking piece. But then it's this delicate balance of, you don't want to over push it or oversell it, but you also don't want to, retreat too much. And so it's just kind of figuring out that balance, and you get to practice that everywhere in life, right? Meeting new friends, interacting with family, all the way to the career and professional side of things. And so I think you just need to find your balance earlier rather than later. And if you feel uncomfortable in selling yourself, that's probably okay. Stretch yourself. You're going to need to know how to do that. It's just important, even when you do get jobs or if you are a professional already, going to that next level, you have to be able to ask and show why you deserve the next job and the next job and the next job. And so I think it's just important for people to do that. And I got lucky of doing that early in my senior year. I think that's what really helped me get that job.
Great. Meg or Tyler, did you have?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Meg.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think for me, and it's kind of a similar thing that I'm trying to remind myself during this time. It's kind of my current mantra, which is like a pause, don't pivot. And I think that's what I did looking back in 2009, 8-9, when I did get the program canceled at Four Seasons, is yes, did I look at every other job? Did I apply for the most random things in the world that I can figure it out? I'm adaptable. But I'm really happy then that I didn't completely change, because when I look at resumes now, you see sometimes people's, they've had those moments. And of course they're going to happen, and I totally get it, but it's the fact that I didn't take the role that was maybe even a higher salary, a better title, but leaving an industry that I still to this day am so happy to be part of. Again, I went through that 4 weeks ago, 3.5 weeks ago, when I got told I was being furloughed from this role. I looked at every role from, Amazon to whatnot. And it was like, this isn't a time to pivot, at least for me and what I want to do. Who knows, talk to me in a few weeks, we'll talk. But for right now, I'm pretty sure that I'll continue, but it's for me, I love what I do, and I'm lucky there. And so it's pause, don't pivot. So there's other things you can do to stay busy, but that's something I'm happy I did then. And it's something that I'm trying to do now too.
Yeah, it's interesting that you found that and that you're doing the same thing and repeating it. So it must mean that it was the right thing to do for you. So that's great. Tyler, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, kind of looking back, there's always things that you could or wish you could have done better. Mine was, I was definitely not as proactive as I should have been. I think when I was approaching graduation is really when I kicked it into high gear. And, granted, nobody could have predicted what's been going on now. So I think, the main thing is really just, do you have that plan ahead of you? And is there a way that you can kind of look at 3 years? I know it's hard to even think about, because obviously right now it's like, all right, I need a job and then we'll take it from there. But if you can have something to where, you can look a little bit farther down the road and then always kind of reaching towards that, I guess, that future goal, that's probably the best advice for now.
Cool. That's great. I had one more question I wanted to get to you guys, and that was, I think, really important is, how did you keep a positive attitude during the job hunting process and the job, I guess, keeping and refinding process during that time period? So Meg, did you want to get started with that one?
Sure. And actually was talking to a friend, a DU grad as well, who just got furloughed. And I said to him, you're allowed to be pissed off. You're allowed to be angry. I mean, depending on how long you feel, but be angry and then move on and figure out what you're going to do, to remain positive, because that really does, if you're going to get on a Zoom call or you're going to talk to somebody, it comes across. So be angry, have a dance party. Again, I have a 4-year-old, so it's a lot of Trolls and a lot of Lion King music right now in our house, but have a dance party, have a margarita, and be angry, and that's allowed. I think for me, it's a lot of it's not me. I didn't do anything. I think it's also remembering it's not a personal thing. This isn't because you did something. This is a situation. Well, hopefully not for most people, but it's the world right now, and it's out of our hands, it's out of our control. So trying to stay positive there, learn a new skill. I mean, also be totally fine if your new skill is watching all the seasons of Parks and Recs. That's fine. Like that gives you something to talk about in an interview. Like it doesn't have to be learning piano or learning Spanish or whatever, or baking bread. I did just start a sourdough starter, so that's my current one. But it doesn't have to be that. It can be something that makes you happy, and staying positive, I think is super important, and finding what that is to you. And then again, put it on your resume, put something in there, bring that personal connection back to and the human element to you.
Great. Let's go to Tyler. What did you do to stay positive?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time I was just happy that I wasn't being called back to live in my parents' basement. So that was a plus. I was able to stay in Denver. But I mean, I think kind of looking at, today's situation, really just stay focused. I mean, yeah, like Meg had said, you don't want to get really down on it because everybody's in the same situation. There's a lot of companies that are going under, a lot that are just kind of trying to maintain status quo. So there's really not much you can do. But if you stay kind of focused on your goals and really just try and talk to a lot of people, with everybody at home, work's a little bit different for those who are still able to work remotely. But they may have more free time for maybe a WebEx call or something like that if you reach out. So I think there are some opportunities for you to network if you kind of reach out in the right way. But yeah, just kind of, look to those goals about talking to people, learning more about, what you would like to do, because, maybe this is an opportunity yet for you to have sort of your trial and error job to be like, well, I gave that a 6-month shot. It really wasn't for me. But just learn about the job from someone who is the hiring manager or somebody that you were talking to. So I think that there's probably a lot of you that, had a job that was rescinded. So keep in touch with that hiring manager in particular, and, make sure that they know you're still interested, because the moment things open up, you're the first person they're going to call.
All right. And Nick, how about yourself? Anything different to stay positive during that time period?
Yeah, I think for me, and what I just recommend to everybody right now is, yes, just like Meg said, take the time and you can sit in it for a little bit. You totally deserve it. You don't need to go out there and have a game plan the next day. That being said, there's also do you want to be, sitting down when it all goes by you, or do you want to be ready to also seize the opportunity when it comes? And so part of it, and I had this conversation with a client 2 days ago who was just a mess. And I was like, just take the rest of the weekend, do whatever you want. Don't look at things, but come Monday, put on your armor. We got to go back to work. We have to do it. We have to get smart and strategic. I think one thing that always has helped me anytime that there's a financial downturn or, just anything that really happens in the world that has ups and downs, there's always an equal reaction on the other side. Right? When people are losing money, someone's making money, right? Someone's making money, someone's losing money. It's always going to kind of have an equal reaction on different sides. And so while yes, this is a really scary time, there are certain industries right now that are booming. Probably 70% of my clients are making more money now during this pandemic than they were prior to this, because they've gotten crafty, they've seized market share, they're taking opportunities. They all had their panic moment, but using logic instead of emotion. Once you kind of clear your head of that, all of a sudden, the world becomes a lot clearer, and there's a lot more opportunity that comes from that.
Great. I think I'm going to take a pause here and just see if, Karen, have there been any questions that came through, and do we want to open it up to the audience? And if not, I'm sure I can start, or I can continue giving you guys questions, but.
Yeah, we've got 2 questions. Our first one is kind of aimed more towards you as a supervisor or manager, and how do you reassure your coworkers or your direct reports that everything's hopefully going to be okay?
Great.
That's a great question. I'll just jump on that one. Amongst all my companies, I probably have had 5 or 6 where I've had to, talk to 100 or 200 people at a time. I think the thing that I always remember is that it's never going to be like the way it was, right? So that's like, and that's even in good times. Never going to be, yesterday is never going to happen again in that exact way. So what are you going to do about it, right? How are you going to change that? I think for me, I keep trying to look at the macro lens. If you look at all the big economic things and even health concerns that have happened over the last 100 years, if you will, like it ebbs and flows. I know that for one of my friends who's raising a kid right now who's like 14, she's paralyzed by this. She's so scared. And I remember my stepfather, who's now in his 80s, was talking to her recently and was like, this is nothing. Like, in the grand scheme of things, I've been through multiple wars, multiple recessions. I've seen all these different things, and we always come back on top. I think that, you need to keep the belief and remember that, we're a pretty smart society, usually, and we will figure it out in the long run. And I think the macro approach is like, yes, we will make it through this. It doesn't mean that it's going to be easy today, but tomorrow is going to be better in some capacity. And I think that's what we're always trying to work towards. And then it is kind of that first question, which is, what are you going to do about it to ensure that you are doing something that can make tomorrow better, not just sitting idly by?
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think for when I'm talking to my, direct reports who are all furloughed as well, it's the positivity. And I think, again, tomorrow is not going to look like when we all come back. And it's, when we all come back, it's not going to be what it was February. So remaining nimble, being flexible, being willing to take on something that is technically maybe beneath you, and being able to do something that, maybe you took a job. I remember again, going back to my 08, or 09, it was like, well, I'm above that. Like I graduated, I have a degree, like I've done all this stuff. And it's like, you know what? Sometimes you have to do stuff that is quote unquote below your skill set in order to show your grit, in order to show your higher ups that you are willing to do that. And then that'll pay off in the long run. I actually saw my hotel manager from Four Seasons at a conference recently, and he's now in the Hamptons, and he's GM of multiple hotels out there. And we were talking, and he said, that's one thing. He's like, still to this day, Meg, I remember that you were willing to scrub dishes at that point, when those 6 weeks. And it's like, I don't do them at home, let alone there. So it's, you have to be willing to be nimble, be adaptable, and do something that, again, isn't, this is going to look different. This is a different landscape. I agree with Nick 100%. So what you're able to do now, stay in touch with people, your higher ups, even if, for me, it's just a text saying to my GM, hope you're doing okay. It's being able to kind of be able to be adaptable through it all.
Great. I was going to say too, some of my colleagues that are reaching out because they're not on projects and are feeling a little, I guess, not sure what to do. I've been telling them, hey, this is actually an exciting time for you, because this is when you can really learn those skill sets that you've always wanted to learn and put more things onto your resume and make yourself more relevant. So instead of think of it as a negative thing, think of it as a positive thing. Like, I've gotten time back in my life, in a sense. I know it's not exactly as rosy as that, but I think if you kind of just change how you think about what you're going through. So
think, when was the last time you spent this much time in your house? Right? Like, I'm definitely becoming an expert chef. I'm definitely finding every house project is done at this point. You'll never have, in some ways, this luxury of being home this much, as awful as that sounds, but that is the nice side of it.
And we had one other question from Zoe, and she's planning to move to the Bay Area this fall. And she's done some networking and informational interviews for jobs and such. And she's just wondering if you have any tips for someone trying to get a first job out of state.
So this is the finance side of me, which is funny because I was never that guy before. But know your costs. Like I know you want, like, yes, definitely go and try to find a job, do all the networking and stuff like that. But one thing you need to do is, especially if you're going to be moving without a guaranteed job lined up and everything, understand the costs associated with this, right? Model out what average rent's going to look like. Model out what all of those things look like for your average spend on utilities and food and going out and all that type of stuff. Because I think you are going to potentially come to a point where it's like a go, no go if you don't have a job, and you need to understand what the financial impact is behind that. When it comes to getting getting tips for the job itself, similar to like what Meg was just saying, even during those 6 weeks, if you don't have your dream job lined up, but you have an offer to do something, seize the opportunity as much as possible, because that's where you can have real room to grow and show your grit and show your determination for something more.
Yeah, and then I'm actually from the Bay Area, so I feel like that's, go Niners. So for me, it is an area too where look at LinkedIn and look at who those secondary and even third connections are, and use, and both Nick and Taylor mentioned this earlier, use the DU network. If it's that's one of the best parts about LinkedIn is it says how many Denver grads worked at a company. So look at that and look at who, and then keep scrolling down. Don't just do the first page. Don't email the person as the highest job there. Go down a little bit until you actually have someone who, if you were to send them a LinkedIn message, and it might be a secondary connection, if you were to say, hey, I saw that you are connected to this person, A, do you know them? Because we all know we've accepted so many LinkedIn people that we're like, oh, I don't really actually know who this person is. And B, would you mind maybe putting me in touch with them? Do they have time just to do, a quick, call to just do that informational thing? I think don't just look at that first page on LinkedIn, who are those connections, but dive in a little bit in those secondary relationships, because that's when I think sometimes the best networking comes out.
And I think logistically too, I've kind of maintained in Denver since I've graduated, but I do hire a lot of positions, and some of those have come from folks who have moved from out of state. And if that's the case, there's all your employers will have certain timelines. Usually if they post a job, they're looking to get you in the office as soon as possible. And granted, of course, that's not always the situation, but kind of have it planned out to where if you are living somewhere else right now and you're applying and they're like, all right, hey, we need to interview you like tomorrow. Be ready for that kind of an ask. And granted, there's a lot of interviews, especially now, that can be like via Zoom or WebEx or some sort of teletechnology, but at the same time, there may be that point to where it's like, hey, we want to get you out here, and when can you start? And if you're like, oh, I've still got some commitments, and maybe a month down the line, that may be a job lost.
Thank you. Well, Juliana, we think we can wrap up here. Any final thoughts from our panelists, from you, or?
Yeah, I was just going to see if there was anything else that they kind of wanted to say that didn't get a chance to. Since we only have a few minutes left, I figured that would be a nice opportunity for them. So do any of you want to start with that, or do you even have anything, or do you feel pretty good?
I would just reiterate remember, don't look at it so tunnel visioned in these times. Obviously these are, it's not fun and it's scary and it's uncertain. But try to take a step back and look at the macro effect as best as you possibly can. These times will pass. We will get to the next stage. We'll get to the next, best economy ever. We'll get to all those different pieces that will come in the future. Just make sure you're adaptable and make sure that you're hungry and that you're willing to go out there and be different than what you are today. And I think that that's going to set you up for success, not only to have a great story when you get to there eventually. And when we have this, again, probably because I don't know, it's always cyclical, right? In the next 7 to 10 years, you'll be able to be like, hey, this is how I got through it. You didn't just sit idly by. So that's my last thought.
Great. Meg or Tyler, did you have any closing words?
Yeah, I just say, if an opportunity presents itself, even if it's not something that's ideal, definitely jump on it. Really kind of look at that job as a more holistic. If it's not the industry you want, or it's not the specific career path, there are certain things that you can transfer to your next job, or to that next pivot for you. Definitely take that, because I think if you have a good story for your next interview, and that's just saying, it's like, wow, I didn't really just sit on my hands during this time. I really went after there. This is my story, and you can tell that, employers will definitely listen.
Yeah, to figure out how Tyler, I think this is my story. That's something we talk a lot about in the luxury hospitality world, is the storytelling of it all. So continue on that. Like, what are the things that you've always wanted to do and you just haven't had time? And what are things that you, again, can put on that, personal interests line on your resume? Build it up now. You have the time, find something, and it could be totally unrelated to what you do. And even that's more fun. I have balloon animals on mine. I do know how to balloon animals. Like those are the things that start conversations and that make you a human. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's great. I feel like it's been interesting because there's been a lot of themes that come out, but I feel like they're the same themes that we hear all the time around networking, around staying positive, about making yourself relevant. And in a sense, now and more than ever, it's more important to just keep those things in mind. So it's not like you're necessarily, from what I heard from you guys, changing what you're doing or changing normal, but you're just amplifying it in a sense and doing all those same things, but being even more aware of it and doing it to an even greater degree. So, Karen, did you have anything else that we needed to do to close out? I know we just have a couple minutes left.
No, I think you guys have been that's given us some great food for thought, some great advice. You're obviously proof that, this too shall pass, and you're going to survive, you're going to be fine. And, like Nick has said, some new normal will come out of this, and we'll live that way. And, for now, kind of keep smiling and find something fun and new to do. So thank you all again for Juliana moderating. Meg, Nick, Tyler, thanks for sharing your thoughts with us today. And I'll just put a plug out there that our career counselors at DU are still here, happy to help you out with whatever you need. So don't be afraid or hesitate to reach out that way as well too. So thanks again, and best of luck to all of you as we move over these next few months doing whatever we're doing.
Thank you guys so much for this. This is great.
Yeah, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all for participating. We'll see you around.